Good evening. Welcome to the People's University. This is our America 250 series, Class 5 of the Revolution and Constitution. This Tuesday, Wheel Vegas Week begins. Part 1, Frank Sinatra, performed by Jay Daniels. We'll have a mocktail called the Sin City Sunset that Julie is making. It's got cranberry and cherry and ginger ale. It's going to... lime, not wine, lime. We can't do that here, Mom. Unfortunately. Oh, well. You can drink at home. The new historical review is available, as you can see. It's also themed America 250. And next week, Thursday at 7, for Class 6 in this series, Mike Giorgiani. Remember Mike from week 3 from Pittsburgh? He'll be back to do Siege and Surrender, so the end of the war, and after that we'll talk about our great documents, and then we'll read them on the finale, which is a daytime program. We have celebrity readers for the Declaration and the Constitution. Our instructor this evening is Robert Orison. He received his bachelor's in historic preservation at Longwood University and his master's in public history from George Mason. He currently serves as the director of the Prince William County Office of Historic Preservation. He also serves on the board of directors of the Frontier Culture Museum, Stafford County, Virginia Historic Commission, and was past president of the Virginia Association of Museums. He has numerous published works and articles and books on the Civil War as well as the American Revolution. Tonight he'll be talking about the Battle of Camden, 1780. He lives in Fredericksburg, Virginia, with his wife and 2 sons. And please meet Robert Orison.
Thank you. All right, make sure, you hear me okay? Good. All right, well, thank you all for having me. I've been to Wheeling several times. I have a couple good friends who live here. It's always good to come back. I dragged my wife and kids with me this time, but they are off getting pizza because we stopped at Fort Necessities, Jumonville Glen, did all the history sites on the way here. My wife said, we are done with history. You go do your history thing. We're going to go get dinner. So I may be eating pretzels for dinner tonight. So my job tonight is, you actually had 2 good friends of mine speak here, Phil Greenwalt, who's a really good friend of mine, and Robert, who spoke here last time from Gloucester, Virginia, talk about some of the events going through the American Revolution. And my job tonight is to stay between these 2 points for the camera, not to move too much around. But my objective is to get you through 1779, 1780, and talk about what I consider the British high tide, or the American low point in the Revolution. And that actually happens in South Carolina. And I believe that the American Revolution is won and lost in the South. And so we'll get into that right now, why I think that. Okay. Real quick geography lesson here. South Carolina is broken up into kind of 3 geographic areas. You have the low country here, the back country, which is kind of the middle part of South Carolina, and then some mountainous regions out far west. Now, the low country is where all the money is. Okay, that's where the large plantations are. That's where the rice and the indigo are being grown, and sugar. So there's a lot of large landowners, large slaveholders in the southern end along the Atlantic Ocean coast. But as you get to the west, you get a little bit more rough and tough, Scotch-Irish. Not necessarily kind of pro Great Britain. And you get small farmers, you get Native American tribes that are both pro and anti-patriot forces. So it's kind of a mixed bag in the western part of South Carolina, what we call the backcountry. And that's going to become a big problem for for Great Britain as they try to tackle the South and as they try to tackle taking over South Carolina. Now, as you've learned, some of you all who've attended the previous talks, after the Battle of Saratoga in New York, the French come into the war, right? And let's all be honest, if it wasn't for the French, there probably wouldn't have been a victory for the United States. When the French come into the war, Great Britain changes its strategy. It's going to move a lot of its men and ships down to the Caribbean. Because keep in mind, as much money as Great Britain makes off the American colonies, it makes about 10 times more off the Caribbean colonies. So when France comes in the war, France starts attacking Great Britain's islands there in the Caribbean. France wants those islands back that they lost in the French and Indian War. And so Great Britain has to change its strategy. They start to move men from the American colonies down to the Caribbean. And so that gives the patriots here in the American states an opportunity. So one of the strategies that Great Britain's going to entail is kind of not give up the northern states like, New York and all the New England states, but kind of just hold tight in New York. The British Army is kind of hemmed in there in New York City, and they're going to send a large force south down to Charleston, South Carolina. And the reason for that is twofold. One, there is some perception that the southern colonies are not as pro-patriot as the northern colonies. So that Great Britain's hoping they'll find more friendly people in the South. Two, the South has been pretty much, there's been some fighting in the South, mainly in 1776, but there hasn't been a whole lot of fighting in the South. And so a lot of the southern regiments that have been raised in the South have went north. And so Great Britain's hoping by coming to the South, they'll find lesser resistance, they'll find smaller armies, they'll find better opportunity, and maybe, just maybe, they can take out the southern colonies or states and then maybe sue for peace somehow. So that's the strategy. It's not a bad strategy, and it's very successful at the very beginning. So this is an image of Charleston, South Carolina. You can see the city there in the distance. You can see the Charleston Harbor. This is the British building siege lines. And so in May of 1780, the British Army under Henry Clinton will arrive in Charleston. And the Americans who are in South Carolina are under the command of a man named Benjamin Lincoln. He's in charge of the American forces in Charleston. Largest American army in the South. Several thousand men are in Charleston. Lincoln will make a strategic mistake. Instead of trying to fight the British outside the city, easy for me to say, right? We have 250 years of quarterbacking, armchair quarterbacking to do. But what he decides to do is go into the city and build siege walls and protect the city. What that does, though, now he's stuck, right? Great Britain also has control of all the water. The British Navy is the most powerful in the world at this time. American Navy, very small, can't compete against the British Navy. And so with the Americans stuck on the peninsula there that's called Charleston, the British are able to cut off the water, exit there at the harbor, and slowly build siege lines and kind of besiege the city. Lincoln does propose trying to break out of the city, but the mayor of Charleston will actually tell him, if you try to leave, we will open the gates of the city and let the British come in and attack you. So Lincoln is in a really hard spot here. He has to defend Charleston, but there's really no way of doing it. So eventually, on May 17th, 1780, he's running out of food. There's no way he can get out. The British are building siege lines closer and closer to the city, which means their artillery, their cannon can hit the city. So on May 12th of 1780, Benjamin Lincoln is going to make a decision to surrender Charleston. 6,500 American troops will surrender in Charleston, the largest American army to surrender the American Revolution. It's a huge defeat for the Americans. And with this army being surrendered, there is no American army in the field south of Pennsylvania. Think about that for a second. This is the largest army in the South, and now it's gone. Fast forward a few weeks, May 29th, 1780, another American disaster takes place at a place called the Waxhaws, which is just south of the North Carolina-South Carolina border. The men here in blue are the 3rd Virginia Regiment. These are Virginia troops that were raised in March and April of 1780. They were heading to Charleston to serve as reinforcements for Lincoln's army. They get about a day's ride away from Charleston. They find out that the Americans have surrendered. They now have to decide what to do. There's about 1,200 of them, so obviously not enough to combat Clinton's army of around 20,000 men. So they're going to double back, and they're going to head back through South Carolina to try to get back to Virginia and get away from the British forces. Clinton will send a very famous British soldier named Bannister Tarleton, who is a cavalry commander. He is very known for his tactics. He's very violent. And so Tarleton will ride his men fast on horseback 10 hours a day to try to catch the Americans, these Virginians. They catch them at the place called the Waxhaws. When Tarleton's men arrive, they send a white flag forward to the American commander and say, surrender your men. No quarter will be given if you don't surrender. No quarter means they'll take no prisoners. Captain Buford, who is the American commander for the Virginians, will say, no, we're going to fight it out. Bad mistake there. He'll put his Virginia infantrymen in a line, and as the British cavalry will charge the Virginians, the Americans, they're told to hold their fire to the last second, which they'll do. They'll fire one volley, but the problem with that is it takes a while to load a musket in the 18th century, right? So by the time they fire that volley, they do take out some of Tarleton's men, but they can't reload. And Tarleton's horsemen are over top of them. And then you see a very violent day here. You can kind of see it here. The British are in the green outfits. Most of the British men are South Carolinians who joined the British Army. They're called provincial soldiers. You can see they have their sabers and they're just whacking the Virginians to pieces. It's a complete disaster for the Americans. There were 400 Virginians that fought in the Battle of the Waxhaws, 150 of Tarleton's British soldiers. Of the 400 Virginians, 113 were killed, 150 were wounded, and 60 were captured. I would call that a pretty bad day. It's called the Massacre at the Waxhaws. It will become notorious throughout the American states. The Patriots in South Carolina will use the violence of Tarleton's men, killing men who are trying to surrender, even though they declined the surrender offering at the very beginning. But it's very violent. The British, let me see, the British only lose 15 guys wounded. That's a big difference, right? And so the Patriots are going to take the Waxhaws, and it's going to be a rallying call. They're going to use it to try to recruit more men. There's lots of things in the Southern papers saying, remember the Waxhaws. These Patriots are going to go around the different courthouses in South and North Carolina saying, we have to fight. They are killing innocent people. You have to sign up and fight for the Patriot cause. And it's going to have a huge impact on how South Carolinians and North Carolinians are going to turn out and join the Patriot cause. So the violent, even though it's a big British victory the day of the battle, looking back, it had, it was a big detriment to the British because the Americans were able to use this fight to their advantage. So you've knocked out the American army in Charleston. It's gone. 6,500 men are gone. The reinforcements have been wiped out. What's left in South Carolina, North Carolina? This is where you see the rise of men like Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, Thomas Sumter, Andrew Pickens. These are small militia leaders who are going to lead what's called partisan bands. Some of these men are enlisted soldiers, but most of them are farmers, shopkeepers that that will fight for a few hours during the day and then go home at night to their families. And that's the only resistance that you'll see in the South for the next several weeks. And so for the British, they're feeling pretty good about things because they've pretty much knocked out all the organized military forces in South Carolina. So in response to this, Continental Congress in Philadelphia, George Washington outside New York City, they have to do something. They cannot lose the southern states. A lot of the food, a lot of the supplies that George Washington's army is using is coming from the South. They cannot lose these states. So Washington and the Continental Congress decide to send these two men south. Baron de Kalb, he's on the left. He's a Prussian-born officer. We would call him German today. He arrives in the colonies with the Marquis de Lafayette. Him and Lafayette are really good friends. They arrive here together. De Kalb is a well-trained soldier. He has led French forces before. He's led Prussian forces. He's an experienced commander. He's exactly what the Americans need. He's in command of the troops from Maryland and Delaware. Those are George Washington's best troops. Washington knows that the situation is so bad in South Carolina that he sends de Kalb and his Marylanders and Delaware troops to the South. The man on the right is probably the most controversial figure of the Southern campaign. This is Horatio Gates. This is the winner of the Battle of Saratoga. He was the American commander at Saratoga that forced that British surrender of Burgoyne's army, got the French involved in the war. Gates is kind of controversial in the sense that he really wants Washington's job, but he's not going to get it. He's going to get sent south. He complains a little bit. He thinks it's a no-win situation to where he's going, but he takes command, and now he has independent command of an army in the South that he has to create himself. What he wants to do is he wants to perform on a solo mission, basically. Every American general has to report to George Washington. George Washington is the 5-star general of the American Army. Gates wants to operate outside of Washington's scope of command. And Continental Congress will actually let him do that for the time he's in South Carolina. It's going to backfire on him, but he does get that independent command. And his job is to try to raise a new American army. Not an easy task. He's got about 1,500 men from Maryland and Delaware under de Kalb, but that's it. Everything else he has to raise on his own. Pretty daunting. The British commanders in the South, I've already talked about Bannister Tarleton here on the left. Very flamboyant, very brave, but many people say he, lacked military maturity. He's very young. The man in the center is Charles Cornwallis. You'll hear about him in the next talk with Yorktown. You probably recognize that name from Yorktown. But for tonight, he's in command of the British forces in South Carolina and North Carolina, for that matter. The man on the right is Henry Clinton. Actually, no, it's James Rawdon. I'm sorry. Rawdon serves under Cornwallis. Rawdon is in command of British troops that were raised here in the States. So those provincials, those loyalist troops, those South and North Carolinians that didn't want to break away from Great Britain, they will serve under Rawdon. Rawdon is an Irishman. He's a very effective commander. The problem is, though, him and Cornwallis are not always on the same page. There's some personality conflicts there. But during this campaign, Rawdon will serve Cornwallis very well. So let's talk about what Gates is going to do. What can Gates do? As I said, he has about 1,500 men under de Kalb. Those are Continental soldiers. Those are regular Army troops from the American Army, well-trained, well-disciplined. They're the cream of the cream for Gates's new army. He's going to ride south and meet them. De Kalb has his men in a place called Wilcox's Mill up here in right central North Carolina. And de Kalb is getting letters and letters and letters from the patriots in South Carolina saying, we need you down here. We need these forces in North Carolina to come to South Carolina. You know, the British troops are ransacking people's homes. Cornwallis has men going out basically go into your house saying, do you pledge loyalty to the king? If you don't, you get arrested and thrown into jail. And so all the southern colonists who are patriots are really begging for the American army to get into South Carolina. But DeKalb's too smart. He's like, I'm not going to move 1,500 men to South Carolina and get beat again by a larger British force. And the army's not ready. There's no food. There's very few supplies. So DeKalb knows not to move yet. We have to get the army built up. We have to get supplied. Horatio Gates arrives on July 25th and says, he calls it the Grand Army of 1,500 men. He does secure about 700 Virginia militiamen from Thomas Jefferson, who's the governor of Virginia at that time. He's been promised this Virginia militia, but they have not arrived yet. They will not arrive until August 14th. So Gates decides, he meets with his officers there, he meets with DeKalb, who's been there for a few weeks, and then he determines that on July 27th, we're going into South Carolina. And DeKalb is like, what are we doing? The army doesn't even have any food. Why are we moving? The reason why they're moving is because in North Carolina, I'm going to stand in front of the map here. In North Carolina, right about down here, just south of the South and North Carolina line, which is right here, is a large militia force of North Carolina militia under Richard Creswell, who is the governor of North Carolina. Can you imagine our governors today leading the forces in the field? That would be funny, right? It's a non-political talk, I promise. It doesn't matter what side you sit on, but seeing any governor in charge of men would be hilarious in the battlefield. But Creswell has this 800-man force in North Carolina that Gates needs. He needs those militiamen to join his army. And Gates will send messages to Creswell saying, I need you to come into North Carolina. Creswell's like, no, I'm the governor of my state. These are my troops. I will do what I want. So Gates is given the option of staying at Cox's Mill, gaining supplies, or joining the North Carolinians that just happen to be down here in South Carolina. Gates will decide to move, and he's criticized for it. But the reason why he does move is he's worried that the British Army that's in Camden, South Carolina, will go and attack that militia force and wipe it out. And Gates says, I can't afford to lose any more American soldiers. I need as many men as I can. So he will determine, as I said, to march south to join Creswell at a place called Deep Creek Crossroads, which is right there. Now, that's the first criticism. He's there for one day and he orders his men to move. Okay? Second criticism, there's two ways to get to where he wants to go. All right? Two ways. The direct route is straight down. And this is what's called the old sand dunes. It's very barren. Here's a photograph to the right of a road that Gates' army would use. It's all sand. It's all pine trees. There are no farms. There are no provisions. And any of the population in this part of North and South Carolina is anti-American. But it's the fastest route. Or, as he was recommended by his staff, to go west down through Salisbury and through modern-day Charlotte, North Carolina, where there are farms. There are pro-American militia groups that will help him raise find cattle, find crops, feed the army, maybe gain some more men. But that's going to add an additional week or two to the march. So Gates again will ignore his staff, ignored DeKalb, who's the professional soldier in the field at the time. Now Gates was a professional soldier as well, but I think he's got a little bit of a complex after he just won Saratoga. He's kind of got that I can't be defeated complex. He's going to march that direct route. And the army will begin to starve. There's no food. And he's begging Thomas Jefferson in letters. You can read the letters today. They're in the archives in Richmond. He's begging, please send me food, send food. But it takes a while to get wagons of food from Virginia down to North and South Carolina. So this army is marching pretty much on empty stomachs. And men start to fall out. Not a good situation. Also, I should say, too, Gates has no cavalry with him, maybe 75 men. So those are the guys on horseback. So these guys are marching blind through a very hostile territory. Not good. These are two modern photographs of Camden, South Carolina. Let me go back. Camden, South Carolina, right at the bottom of my map here, was as far west as you could go on a navigable river in South Carolina. It was a major trading post. The British had established a base there, and they had started to establish kind of new local government under British rule. The house here on the left is the Kershaw House. This is Cornwallis's headquarters when he comes to Camden. It's been rebuilt, so what you see today is a modern reconstruction. And on the right is some original foundations of the powder magazine that the British built there. So they are trying to make these outposts across South Carolina to allow them to reinstitute British rule. Okay? Cornwallis has won militarily. Now he has to win politically, and that's where he runs into a problem. Because Cornwallis is going to, as I said before, he's going to start having people go door to door and say, you need to pledge your loyalty to the king. If you don't, you're in jail. And so that's going to really, as I mentioned before, it's going to really upset a lot of the Americans who were on the fence. Most of the people in South Carolina were of the notion of, well, I'm going to sit this out, and whoever treats me the best, I might get involved on their side. Well, when the British come through and throw your dad in jail, or throw your husband in jail, or throw your sons in jail, that's really going to move you in a certain direction, isn't it? And so you start to see these partisan groups under Sumter, Francis Marion, and others start to grow in numbers because of Cornwallis's kind of political decisions he makes. So Camden, very important town, very important trading post. And this, when Gates sets out from North Carolina into South Carolina, his objective is to capture Camden. He can't capture Charleston. There's no way his small army can go into Charleston and capture that major city. But he's hoping he can get down to Camden pretty quick. There's about 800 British troops here, not many. He's hoping he can sweep in and get a victory, right? And maybe reinvigorate the American cause in South Carolina. So in Gates' mind, he has a clock ticking. And he's got to move pretty quick. So my wife always says these maps are just a bunch of red and blue lines everywhere, so she's not wrong. The blue is the American lines, the red is the British. So Gates will meet Cresswell's forces in early August. Those are the North Carolina militia that he needs to save and combine his army with. He does convince Cresswell to join him and move south. So now Gates has about 2,200 men in his new army. Rawdon, the men I mentioned before, the Irishman, he's in command at Camden, of the British forces in Camden. There's several hundred men in Camden. And Rawdon knows that Gates is coming. Because remember, all the people over here where Gates has been marching through are pro-British. They're sending the word back. So Rawdon sends messages to Cornwallis, who's in Charleston, saying, I need reinforcements. The Americans are heading to Camden. So Cornwallis has to order reinforcements to Camden. But until he can do that, Rawdon will send small forces to places called Little Lynch's Creek, which is a major waterway that Gates would have to cross to get to Camden, and to a place called Hanging Rock, which is now a new Revolutionary War battlefield park in South Carolina. If you ever go down here, Hanging Rock's a great little battlefield park to visit. So Rawdon has these small forces kind of out front to kind of slow Gates down and to allow Cornwallis time to reinforce Camden. Gates gets to Little Lynch's Creek on August 10th. Rawdon's in a very strong position on a high bluff. Gates decides, well, I'm not going to attack him here. And he's still waiting on the Virginia militia, which still hasn't gotten there yet. Virginians are kind of slow. And he's going to move his American army, this blue arrow, westward to a place called Rugeley Mills on a different road. So he was on one road to get to Camden. Now he's marched about 15 miles west to get what's called on the Great Wagon Road, which is still a road that went from the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia and Pennsylvania all the way down north South Carolina. So he's shifted himself from this location to this location. By doing that, Rawdon has pulled back all of his British forces into Camden. And Cornwallis is now arriving with more men. So the British have a good number of men in Camden. Gates, as I said, is in Rugeley's Mill. On August 14th, those 700 Virginians will arrive. So now he feels really confident. He's got 800 North Carolina militiamen, 700 Virginia militiamen, and about 1,200 Continental soldiers. The problem with the Virginia militiamen, folks, they just signed up 2 weeks ago. And most of them don't have muskets. That's a problem. You can't fight without training and something to shoot with. Gates seems to ignore all this as he's designing his plan. So on August 14th, when the Virginians arrive, Gates gets his council of war together, which is his staff, his officers, and says, let's come up with a plan. He's heard that Camden is very unprotected. There's not a large force there, which was correct the week before. He's also heard correctly that a lot of men in the British Army in Camden are sick. If you go to Camden in the middle of August, it's a swamp. A lot of these there's about 400 British soldiers who are deathly ill, not men that can fight. And so Gates knows this. He's gotten some intelligence on this. So he needs to, in his mind, swoop down, capture Camden before Cornwallis can get there. He gets some word that Cornwallis has arrived with more British troops, but he kind of just discounts it a little bit. Like, well, we're here. We got to go somewhere, right? We can't go back. Again, Army's still hungry. They haven't really gotten a whole lot more a lot more supplies to kind of feed the men. And so Gates, at this war council, sits his officers around, and it's the first time he takes a muster roll. It's the first time he counts the number of men in his army. First time. He thinks he's got 7,000 Continental troops and militiamen in his army. 7,000 men. That's what he has. Well, his officers are saying, we got about 3,500. And Gates goes, well, that'll be enough. So he just cut his army in half, right? So he was planning this strategy in his brain, knowing that he had 7,000 men, but now he's just learning he's got 3,500 men. That may make some of us go, might want to rethink this. But again, in his mind, he's got to get to Camden. He's got to get an American victory. His officers, DeKalb, we'll learn. We don't know what DeKalb said this night on the 14th. Spoiler alert: DeKalb will die. So at the battle, so we don't know what he said. But some of the men who were in this meeting said DeKalb was very much against doing this, but Gates wouldn't have anything of it. Gates' plan is to move out on August 15th at 10 o'clock at night, which his officers weren't fans of. Remember, 2/3 of his army is militia. And moving these men, getting them out of camp at night, not an easy task to do. Move south on the old wagon road to a place called Sanders Creek. If you go there today, you can see there's a creek and there's a high bluff on the northern side of the creek. Gates wanted to get his army down there, build earthworks, and challenge the British to come attack them. Now, if you heard about Saratoga, that's exactly what he does at Saratoga, at Bemis Heights, is he builds those earthworks and challenges the British Army to attack them. As much as I pick on Gates, he wasn't dumb. He knew his militia weren't going to be strong in battle. The best place to put militia is behind earthworks, behind a wall, right? So that was his plan. March them down here, earthworks, and challenge the British to attack them, which he thought they would have to attack them because they just can't leave the American army sitting that close to their base. They move out, like I said, at 10 o'clock on August 15th. Usually back then, each man got a certain portion of rum for the march. Not bad. You won't get that this week at the lunch talk about the Vegas, but that's okay. They didn't have any rum. They didn't have any whiskey. They gave them molasses. Down. This is a family talk. Molasses did some crazy things to the men as they ate green corn and drank molasses. Dozens of men, and this is all documented, start falling out with intestinal issues in the middle of the night as they're marching south. It's a bad scene for these Americans marching toward Camden. Unfortunately for Gates, Cornwallis is in town, and he's got reinforcements from Charleston. He's got reinforcements from a place called 96, which is a British outpost, western South Carolina. And Tarleton has arrived. Cornwallis, at the exact same time, folks, this is how history is sometimes, the exact same time that Gates's men are leaving their camp at Rugeley Mills, Cornwallis's men leave Camden to head north. Cornwallis is a very aggressive commander. He doesn't want Gates to attack him in Camden. He's worried that the men who are sick will be in the way. And if he loses the battle, he won't be able to get those troops out of the hospitals and on the road back to Charleston. So when Cornwallis arrives, he gets the army ready, and they move out at 10 o'clock on August 15th. Same time. Of course, Gates had no idea this was going to happen. And unfortunately for Gates, he will not make it to Saunders Creek because just on the southern end of the battlefield, which is the battlefield park there today, run by Historic Camden, the two armies will run right into each other. In the middle of the night, 3 a.m. Now the moon's bright. You had the 33rd Regiment of Foot, some of the best men in the British Army, the 23rd Regiment of Foot marching on either side of the road, and Tarleton's cavalry behind them. The rest of the British Army are in column marching up that road. Gates's men, he's got a very small cavalry force, about 25 guys, 25, 30 men. And some small continental forces on either side of the road. That's how they would march, right? They'd have some men on either side of the road that kind of scout out the sides of the road, and then the main column would be in the road. They run right into each other, and a sharp fight happens. Several dozen men are killed at night. The Americans, or Gates's men, are going to pull back north to right about where my cursor is here, and the British troops will get into formation where they were, and they will both lay on their guns that night and sleep the best they can, just about 200 to 300 yards apart from each other. And now Gates knows he's facing not just British troops, but now he knows Cornwallis is there. So now he definitely knows for sure that the British army is larger than he thought. This is the battlefield today. They've done a really good job recreating the battlefield. It's longleaf pine, so it's fought in the pine forest. But when you think of a pine forest today, you think of a forest you can't see through, right? It's wide open. These are huge, tall pines. Longleaf pine, it's hard to see in the picture, but it's not like any pine tree you see in these parts. And it's wide open underneath, so the men can see each other. The British and the Americans can see each other at night. You know, they can hear each other for sure, may see a couple campfires. They're just a couple hundred yards apart. Gates has another war council and says, okay, what do we do? The Virginia militia commander, Edward Stevens, says, might as well stay and fight. And Gates goes, all right, we'll take that advice. Now, there's a lot of debate about what Gates could have done. Some say DeKalb, that Prussian general, still was arguing to leave. Like, we're not ready for this fight. But how hard would it be to move an army of 2,500 men, wagons, in the middle of the night, just 200 yards away from the enemy? And you know he's got Tarleton's cavalry. You think Cornwallis is just going to let him go? So Gates decides, I can't leave. It's hard to move an inexperienced army in the middle of the night. You should have learned that, right, a few hours before then. I can't get out of here, so I have to fight. That's what they're going to decide to do. And it's not going to be a very large battle, a very long battle. The blue is the American line. This is On the right flank, on your left, is the DeKalb's men, those Continental soldiers, those kind of well-trained, well-prepared men. Some of the best fighters in the American Army are on the right side of the road here. Maryland, Delaware. He's going to put 7 pieces of artillery in the road. And he's going to the left flank. He's going to have North Carolina and the Virginia militia. Remember I said the Virginia militia just joined a few weeks ago? Not a lot of them have guns. That's going to be a problem. And so he's going to set that line up as best he can in the middle of the night. As the sun starts to come up, Gates gets word that the 33rd Regiment of Foot, which is that really good British regiment right here, and this is the British line, just kind of opposite the American line. The 33rd Regiment of Foot that morning had woken up and they were in the wrong places. And so Cornwallis was moving the regiment around. The Americans thought they were retreating or they were leaving the field. Gates would make the mistake of ordering the Virginia militia and the North Carolina militia forward. The 33rd Regiment of Foot folks were not leaving. They were just kind of moving themselves to where they needed to be. The Virginians step off. They go 20, 30 yards. The 33rd Regiment of Foot, the 23rd Regiment of Foot have bayonets on their guns. Most of the Americans do not have bayonets. They drop their bayonets. They do that famous yell that they write about so often, and they charge the militia. And the Virginia militia folks said, you know what? That's it. We're out of here. And they dropped what weapons they had, and they left. I don't think 80% of those men ever fired a shot. They ran from the field as quickly as they got there. That's an issue, because now the North Carolina militia has been left holding the bag, and they start to run. When you look off to your left and you see 700 men take off behind you, and you have some of the best British soldiers in the world with bayonets charging at you, that really makes you think twice about what independence and freedom is, right? And so a lot of that North Carolina militia is going to pull out as well. And the poor Continentals on this side of the road, who are actually fighting really well, they're actually pushing the British soldiers in front of them. They're actually pushing them back. But they look off to the left, and they're like, the militia's gone. And then Cornwallis, I keep staying in front of the map, I'm sorry. Cornwallis is going to order the men to wheel to the left, his troops, and they're going to encircle what's left of DeKalb's Continental soldiers. The Continentals here, the Marylanders, and the North Carolina troops are going to fight some of the best fighting of any American forces in the American Revolution, but it's for naught. They hold out for a long time, being surrounded. Oh, I might hit something here. I'll keep going. There we go. Like I said, they get surrounded, and DeKalb himself will go down. His horse will get shot. The horse will fall on top of him. He'll get shot twice while laying there, and he'll get bayoneted about 9 times by British soldiers. He lives a few more days. The Continentals start to leave as fast as they can. They're running through the swamp here. There's a wet area they're kind of running through here. The indefensible part, the problem that will get Gates fired, I mean, obviously losing the battle is going to get him fired, but what's really going to get Gates fired, I want to make sure I get the mileage right here, is that he will leave the field. That night, Gates will find himself in Charlotte, North Carolina, 60 miles away. Now, he's not with his men. When the militia flee the field, he gets swept up with the militia and he is gone. So while he's riding north along that road, DeKalb is down here by himself without his commanding officer doing what he can. And Gates will get criticized for that greatly. As this militia and the Continentals start to leave, Cornwallis will order Tarleton's cavalry, those vicious fighters I mentioned at Waxhaw's. They will ride up and they will start slashing what they could slash. They'll capture all the wagons that they could capture. They captured DeKalb's personal baggage train. He's got like 6 wagons of baggage and a monkey. DeKalb was traveling with a French-dressed monkey. Can't make that up. The Tarleton's men write about capturing a monkey that was dressed as a French officer in DeKalb's wagon. So, rich people do strange things sometimes. As I said, Gates reached Charlotte in about that night 60 miles. By August 19th, Gates himself and the staff were in Hillsborough, North Carolina, which is 120 miles away. Alexander Hamilton, I'm sure all of you have heard of Alexander Hamilton. When he learned about Gates, this is a great quote he would write. Was there ever an instance of a general running away as Gates has done from his army? And was there ever so precipitous a flight? 180 miles in 3 days and a half. It does admirable credit to the activity of a man and his horsemanship, but it disgraces the general and the soldier who did it. Gates will last a few more months, and then he will be fired and replaced by Nathaniel Greene. Here's a sketch done after the war showing DeKalb wounded. Cornwallis would ride up to DeKalb. They will have a very nice conversation. I can't imagine how nice DeKalb could be with 11 wounds. Cornwallis will detail his own personal doctor to take care of DeKalb. DeKalb will die a few days later. His last words supposedly were, "I thank you, sir, for your generous sympathy," talking to the doctor, "but I die the death I've always prayed for, the death of a soldier fighting for the rights of man." DeKalb will be buried in a small grave where this marker is in Camden. And then in 1825, he'll be picked up, he'll be exhumed, and he'll be moved and placed under a proper monument there in Camden. And the man that laid the cornerstone to that monument was his good friend, the Marquis de Lafayette. When he came back to America, he helped dedicate the monument there to DeKalb. So really quick, as I'm wrapping up here, casualties. So 2,100 British soldiers fought in this Battle of Camden. 68 were killed, 245 wounded, 11 were missing. 4,000 Americans, probably a little bit high of a number there. 900 killed and wounded. That's a lot of people, ladies and gentlemen. And 1,000 were captured. So now another American army is gone from the South. British are riding high. A couple years ago, I had the honor to be in Camden. They uncovered 12 men there on the battlefield doing some archaeology. 14 men, 12 U.S. soldiers, 1 Scottish soldier, and 1 Native American soldier. The Americans were put into one big common grave. They still had their continental buttons. If you guys read the news lately or seen TV, they just identified one of those Maryland soldiers as Private Pumphrey. He was 16 years old. They did a reburial ceremony down in Camden several years ago. It was great to be there. These are some men from Scotland with the British soldier that they found in the battlefield. The Americans are reburied there in Camden today, in the city of Camden. Really quick, a couple of things that happened just after Camden. So as I said, the American Army has been wiped out. They're gone. Cornwallis hears there's another American force under Thomas Sumter, a place called Fishing Creek, which is a few miles north of Camden. Tarleton catches up with Sumter at a place called Fishing Creek. Here's a little monument placed there by the DAR in 1930. Tarleton wipes out Sumter's force there. So again, another huge American defeat. But we'll end on a good note for the Americans. This is the place on the right. This is the battlefield of Musgrove Mill. The same day as Fishing Creek. This is August 19th. Loyalist militia, provincial soldiers, caught up to some American pro-patriot militia at Musgrove's Mill. And the American militia had heard about Camden. They knew it was a disaster. And so did the Loyalists. The Loyalists expected to charge across this field and the Americans would run. The Americans didn't run. And the American militia beat the British militia at Musgrove Mill. A very small battle. But what that's going to do is it's going to show the Americans that the way they're going to win this war in the South isn't through a large army in the field. They need an army in the field, but they need these small partisan groups under Sumter, Pickens, Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. If you ever seen the movie The Patriot, that's the Mel Gibson character, right? Francis Marion. It's going to be those types of forces, because Cornwallis is never going to be able to politically win in the South. He's not going to have enough men to stamp out all these little small groups as they come up. And so the British will never gain control of South Carolina, even though they don't have a large army there in the field. And so that's going to drive Cornwallis crazy. And eventually he's going to move north. His men will fight a battle at Kings Mountain. They'll lose at Kings Mountain. They'll lose at Cowpens. Then they head to Virginia. You know how Yorktown ends. I like to put this up here. I was going to embarrass my 13-year-old son tonight, but I say he chose pizza over me. He drew this when I was working on this book. He drew this little sketch, and he heard me talk about this battle so many times. This is a 9-year, he's 13 now, but this is a 9-year-old's perception of the battle. This is supposed to be General Gates. He said, there are a lot of British, but we can do this. And Gates yells, Maryland, Virginia. And Virginians run. And then the Marylanders say, oh, and the British say fire. So what I just did in 45 minutes, he did in a comic sketch. But anyways, I want to thank you all for having me. It's always fun to talk history with people that will listen to you. As you probably heard from my friend Phil Greenwald, who spoke here a couple of weeks ago, our group, Emerging Revolutionary War, we're kind of a public history group. We're all private and professional historians in our day job. This is what we do for fun, which some of my non-history friends go, why are you going to Wheeling for fun talk? This is what I do. But check us out, emergingrevolutionarywar.org. I have flyers down front. We have a blog. We have a podcast. We do tours. And what we really love to do is what we're doing right now. So thank you all for listening to me.
You ready for some questions, Rob?
Of course.
If anyone has a question, just raise your hand. I will come to you with the mic. Anybody?
There we go. We got one. Thank you. It can't be a hard one, though, all right? That's the deal.
Given the time that this occurred, there wouldn't have been paved streets and not a whole lot of infrastructure probably. So like in the case of Charleston, when you had 6,500 prisoners, did the British just keep them in town or what did they do with them?
That's a great question. So that's a story that should be written. It's been written somewhat. It's written about the New York prisoners. Most of them are put on prison ships in Charleston Harbor. And about 40% of the American prisoners will die in prison ships. And in New York, it's even more than that. Cornwallis, his boss Clinton, who was in command when they captured Charleston, will offer pardons to a lot of the men if they sign agreements not to fight anymore. And then they change their mind a few weeks later. And so a lot of those men who didn't get their pardon signed or get out signed are left on British ships in the harbor. You can imagine what it's like to be in the harbor in the bottom hull of a ship in August of Charleston, South Carolina. The officers, they get to stay in houses in town, but most of those prisoners captured in Charleston will be kept in the hulls of prison ships in the harbor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have a question or a comment?
I have a question about Tarleton from the Patriot movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if it was true or not when he locked those people in the church and what town that was in. Is that during this time or before or
That
after?
was during this time, but not true.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of Tarleton, but I can't go that far. He did do some horrible things, but he did not do that. I think the movie's trying to show you, of course, the movie has a very limited amount of time to show what they want to show. They're trying to show you that he was very violent, but effective. He was very effective as a commander. But that scene there, it's a horrible scene, but that did not happen, no.
Okay. Thank you. That's good.
Anybody else have a question or a comment?
Okay.
And you can always come up front when we're done if you don't want to ask in public.
Again, for the year this preceded any kind of railroads or things. So was a primary method of moving soldiers on foot in those days?
Yep. It's a long march. So DeKalb's men will leave Morristown, Pennsylvania, Morristown, New Jersey, sorry. Morristown, New Jersey, and march all the way down from Washington's camp in Morristown all the way down. They find out about the Charleston surrender near Petersburg, Virginia, and they keep going. So I forget how long it takes them. It takes them several weeks, but it's all by foot. The British would move a lot of men by ships because they had the Navy, but the Americans very rarely would they move men by ship. The French will move men by ship at Yorktown, which you hear about in the next talk. But most of the Americans are all going to be on foot.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Any last questions or comments?
We're going to make sure you get your steps in back and forth.
Yeah, sorry. What happened to Gage after the war, after he was dismissed from command?
So Gates.
Gates, I'm sorry.
So Gates will go back north. He will demand, what we call a court-martial today. He's a general without a job. So he's just up there without any men. He doesn't really get, fired from the army like Charles Lee would from Monmouth. Gates will get himself mixed up in something at the end of the war. After the war is pretty much done, but the war is not over, Washington's officers are really mad that they haven't been paid. Continental Congress is poor. They have no money. The French have paid as much as they can. But anyway, so Gates gets involved with this. It's not a mutiny, but the officers are thinking about, let's go to Philadelphia and demand they pay us. And Gates is part of that. And Washington puts a kibosh on that. It's a very famous scene up in New York where Washington hears about these men and Gates trying to do this, and he'll walk up and give this speech to his officers. He's this famous line. He doesn't have his glasses on. And he says, excuse me, I've grown blind in the service of my country. And the men are like, oh. And the whole plan to march on Philadelphia to demand payment is like gone. This man has given everything to this cause. We can sacrifice a little more. At that point, Gates is casted out because he's so well involved in trying to think of that plan to go down to Philadelphia. And that's the American nightmare, right? The British forces, the American army or an army marching on the political capital to take over, like Caesar did in Rome. And so Gates gets himself mixed up in that, and at that point he's cashiered out of the army. That's 82.
Were there any Native Americans involved in the North and the South Carolina fracases?
Yes, so as I mentioned, one of the soldiers they found was a Native American soldier. They don't know yet if it's Cherokee or Cheraw. So a lot of the tribes in South Carolina were split about if they went to the British side, they went to the American side. They were Native Americans kind of interspersed in both armies at that time, not individual units. They would just join a regiment or a militia group. The problem they're having with this individual is they don't know if it was because they were buried in kind of a common grave. The British soldiers they found were in like what you would consider a proper grave. The Americans and the Native American were just kind of thrown into a hole, for lack of a better term. So they don't know if this person that they found was on the British side of the battlefield or the American side of the battlefield. But the Cherokee were very much divided as far as who they fought for. It all came down to the villages sometimes in these tribes. A lot of times the tribe would say they're for a certain side, but then some of the villages would break off and join the other side. So as far as Native Americans go, it's very much a civil war. It's a civil war among the white settlers as well. There are also African Americans that are fighting on both sides here too. The British would offer a lot of the slaves freedom if they fought. And then eventually some of the American commanders would do the same for slaves. Like, hey, if you fight with the American army, we'll give you your freedom after the war. So it's a very mixed bag. It's a very, It's probably the most racially diverse army that Americans will have up until World War II, because they're all mixed. They're not separate units. They're all mixed together. And that's not because I'm thinking they're not progressive. It's necessity. Washington was very much against African Americans serving in the Army at the beginning. And then, he's required, the situation changed, right?
Okay. One last question, if there are any.
Yes.
Can you repeat the question, Rob?
So I think what you said is that wagon road near, you said I-77? No, the wagon road would come down through the valley of Virginia, and then, hold on real quick. Let's back up that. 'Cause I really like old roads. So I'll go back to the first map I had in the presentation here. The wagon road's going to come down right through here. 77 is right here, goes to Greensboro. It came down through this way. It's going to go through Cowpens. Some of it went to Augusta, and a branch went to Camden. So a little bit farther west than modern day 77. Route 15 and Route 1 follow a good part of it in South Carolina. Give you all a headache by fast forwarding really quick.
I visited the Battle of Cowpens, and they try to make the battlefield look like it did back then. And the ranger that I spoke with didn't believe that the British couldn't see the American forces, like the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Right, they're hidden, right.
Have you visited there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, the ranger's right. Yeah. And a lot of these places are trying to replicate the landscape back to the way it was. Cowpens is a national park. Camden is run by, the American Battlefield Trust, which is a large preservation group that buys up battlefield lands, bought a big part of Camden. But there's a museum in the town of Camden called Historic Camden, where the Kershaw House is located. They have several historic buildings in the original Camden Village, but they also run the battlefield. So all the work they're doing up there is volunteer and nonprofit. So it's a lot to recreate a longleaf pine. Some of those trees were planted 20 years ago. It takes a while for those trees to get up. But yeah, landscape, going to visit these places reading a book is great. I read books every night, but going there and seeing what those men and people saw doesn't replace, as you saw, right? You saw that the Patriot wasn't all that accurate because you saw the landscape. So.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for coming.